Commander Ara had seen disasters across 200 star systems. She had coordinated evacuations from dying worlds, managed rescues from stations breaking apart in the void, and pulled survivors from the ruins of colonies crushed by meteor strikes. In her 30 years with the Galactic Disaster Recovery Council, she had learned one fundamental truth: you cannot save everyone. The mathematics were simple. In any disaster, resources were limited, time was limited. The ships you had, the rescue pods, the medical supplies, the personnel, all of it had to be calculated and distributed for maximum effect. You identified who had the highest chance of survival. You prioritized those with the skills the galaxy needed most. You accepted the losses that were inevitable. It was logical. It was efficient. It had saved millions of lives across the known galaxy. The council chambers on Nexus Prime were designed to inspire confidence. Crystalline walls displayed real-time data from 1,000 worlds. Holographic projection showed disaster response teams in action across 3 sectors. Representatives from 40 species sat in perfect rows, their translation devices humming softly as they conducted the business of saving lives. Ara stood at her station, her computation nodes glowing faintly beneath her translucent skin. These biological processors allowed her species to calculate probabilities faster than most computers. Right now, they were telling her that the presentation she was about to witness would be a waste of time. The humans were here. Earth had submitted an application to join the Galactic Disaster Recovery Council 3 months ago. The initial review had been concerning. Their methods appeared chaotic, their protocols seemed to ignore basic efficiency calculations, and their success rates were impossible. The Council had requested a full presentation of their techniques before making a final decision. A woman walked to the center of the chamber. She was human, shorter than most species present, with dark hair streaked with gray and scars crossing her weathered face. She wore a simple uniform with patches indicating decades of service. Her name, according to the brief, was Commander Sarah of Earth's International Search and Rescue Coalition. "Thank you for seeing us," said, her voice clear through the translation system. "I know you've reviewed our application. I know many of you have concerns about our methods. I'm here to explain why we do what we do." Ara pulled up the files on her display. The first case study appeared, the Titan mining disaster of 2247. A moon in the Sol system had suffered catastrophic tectonic instability. 200 miners trapped 3 kilometers underground, multiple cave-ins, toxic atmosphere, power failing. The Titan incident began. Standard galactic protocol would have calculated the survivability index at approximately 12%. The resources required for a rescue attempt would have been substantial. Those same resources could have secured evacuation for over 2,000 personnel from a nearby research station that was also experiencing structural problems. Ara nodded slightly. Yes, that was exactly what the protocols would have dictated. Save the many, not the few. Save those with higher survival probability. Basic mathematics. "We sent in 8 rescue teams," continued. 60% of our available resources in that sector. We drilled new shafts. We pumped in oxygen. We brought in equipment that we barely had. The operation took 48 hours. We lost 3 rescuers in a secondary collapse. The holographic display showed images of the rescue. Humans in bulky suits working in impossible conditions. Tunnels barely wide enough to crawl through. Faces covered in dirt and blood, still pushing forward. "We saved 197 miners," said quietly. "Then we went back and evacuated the research station. All 2,000 personnel. No losses at either site." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Ara felt her computation nodes trying to make sense of the numbers. It should not have been possible. The resource allocation alone should have resulted in catastrophic failures at both sites. How? The question came from Delegate, a philosopher whose species valued logical perfection. "The mathematics do not support this outcome." Smiled slightly. No, they don't. Not if you're only calculating immediate survivability, but you're missing variables. She pulled up another case study. The Harmony Station breach of 2249. A space station with 15,000 inhabitants had suffered a reactor containment failure. Radiation flooding through multiple sections. Hull integrity failing. Standard protocol. Evacuate priority personnel, seal contaminated sections, accept losses in the red zones. We didn't seal the sections, said. We sent in radiation teams. We jury-rigged containment. We carried people out on stretchers through areas that should have killed our rescuers. According to your protocols, we should have saved maybe 5,000 people. We saved 14,200. At what cost? Ara asked. She could not help herself. The numbers made no sense. How many rescuers did you lose? 43, said. Her voice was steady, but something in her eyes showed the weight of those losses. 43 people who knew the risks and went in anyway, because we have a saying on Earth, nobody gets left behind. That is inefficient, Ara said flatly. You sacrificed trained personnel who could have saved lives in future disasters for people who had low survival probability. Yes, agreed. That's what the math says, but here's what the math doesn't show you. She pulled up personnel files. Faces filled the holographic display. She was one of the miners we saved from Titan. She went on to invent a new type of portable shield generator that has saved 300 lives in subsequent disasters. This is Harmony Station Survivor. He designed the new emergency containment systems that are now standard on 40% of human stations. This is little Anna. She was 6 years old when we pulled her out of Harmony. She's 19 now, studying emergency medicine. Next year she'll be saving lives herself. Looked around the chamber. Your protocols optimize for immediate results. Ours optimize for something else. Community. Resilience. The understanding that every person we save goes back and makes the galaxy better. The miner you write off might be the engineer who solves your next crisis. The child you abandon might grow up to save your children. Emotional reasoning, Delegate said dismissively. Not logical foundation for policy. Maybe, said, but it works. Our survival rates are higher than galactic standard. Our response times are faster. Our communities are stronger because people know we'll come for them. All of them, not just the ones who score high on a priority index. Ara studied the data again. It was true. Somehow, impossibly, it was true. Human disaster response had better overall outcomes despite appearing to violate every principle of efficient resource management. Her computation nodes churned through the variables, trying to find the flaw in the data. There was no flaw. The humans simply operated on a different set of principles, and those principles produced results that should not have been possible. Your application is, Ara said finally. The words felt heavy but necessary. Your methods, while showing positive results in your own systems, do not align with galactic standards. The emotional component introduces too many variables. The risk to trained rescue personnel is unacceptable. The inefficient resource allocation could not be sustained at galactic scale. Nodded slowly, she had expected this answer. I understand, thank you for your time. The human delegation left the chamber quietly. Ara returned to her duties, filing the Earth application in the archives. The galaxy would continue with the methods that had worked for thousands of years. The humans could continue their emotional, inefficient rescues on their own worlds. 3 weeks later, everything changed. The quantum cascade failure at Helix Station began at 3:47 Galactic Standard Time. Ara was reviewing reports when the emergency alarm screamed across every channel. Helix was more than just a station. It was the Council's primary coordination hub, home to 50,000 souls from 100 worlds, and the central nerve center for disaster response across 6 sectors. Now it was tearing itself apart. The quantum drive had destabilized in a way no one had predicted. Sections of the station were folding into dimensional rifts, entire corridors simply ceasing to exist. The cascade was spreading faster than containment teams could respond. Ara watched the probability calculations with growing horror. Standard protocol activated automatically. Evacuate Tier 1 personnel, scientists, diplomats, high-value specialists. Secure the data cores. Withdraw all ships to safe distance. Accept inevitable losses. The numbers were clear and brutal. They could save 8,000 people, maybe 10,000 if they were fortunate. The rest would be gone before rescue could reach them. 40,000 souls, written off by mathematics. Ara coordinated the evacuation with mechanical precision, but something felt wrong. She watched names disappearing from the manifest as sections collapsed. Maintenance workers, civilian families, junior staff, all of them in sections marked red on the display, all of them beyond help according to the protocols. Then her sensors detected ships dropping out of FTL at the disaster perimeter. 37 vessels, military carriers, civilian transports, medical frigates, all broadcasting the same identifier. Human. Ara opened a channel, her voice sharp with urgency. Unidentified vessels, you are entering a critical disaster zone. You do not have clearance. Withdraw immediately. The response came from a frigate that her database identified as the USAR Persistence. The voice was familiar. Commander Ara, this is Sarah. We heard the distress call. We're here to help. You cannot help, Ara said, forcing calm into her voice even as sections of Helix winked out of existence on her display. The cascade is unstable. Survival probability for anyone entering the affected zones is below 15%. Standard protocol requires. Ma'am, with respect, interrupted, we didn't ask for the odds. We're going in. You can court-martial us later. Ara watched in disbelief as the human ships accelerated toward Helix Station. They were not following standard approach vectors. They were not establishing safe perimeters. They were diving directly into the sections marked as lost. The humans had come to save people that mathematics said could not be saved. And despite everything her training told her, despite all the logical protocols screaming that this was wrong, Ara felt something she had not expected. Hoping. The human ships scattered across the disaster zone like seeds on wind. Ara watched their movements on the tactical display and nothing made sense. They were ignoring every protocol, every safety margin, every calculated risk assessment. They were going to get themselves killed. The first human team breached Sector 7, a residential area that had been marked as lost. The dimensional rifts had torn through it 12 minutes ago. Standard calculation said anyone in that sector was already gone. The humans sent in a team of 20. USAR Team 3 to Helix Command, a voice crackled over the emergency channel. We have survivors, 17 civilians in a sealed room, extracting now. Ara pulled up the sector data. That room should not have been sealed. The life support should have failed. The structure should have collapsed. But there they were on the scanner, life signs moving toward the extraction point. More reports flooded in. The humans were finding people in sections that should have been empty tombs. They were using equipment Ara did not recognize. They called them void swimmers, rescue specialists in powered armor who could navigate the dimensional tiers themselves. They established casualty collection points in areas that had no structural integrity according to every scan. Commander, Ara opened a direct channel. How are you doing this? The sections you are entering should not be survivable. His voice came back, strained with effort. People find ways to survive. Our job is to find them. How's your evacuation going? We have secured 8,200 personnel, Ara reported. Tier 1 priority as per protocol. There was a pause, then said something that made Ara's computation nodes freeze. Only 8,000. You have 50,000 people on that station. The others are in unrecoverable sections, Ara explained, but the words felt hollow. The survival probability is something we can change, cut her off. "Commander, I need you to send me the complete manifest. Every person on Helix. I don't care what their priority rating is." "That is not protocol. Protocol is about to let 40,000 people die," said flatly. "Send me the manifest." Ara hesitated. Everything in her training said this was wrong, but she thought about the Titan miners who should have died, the Harmony Station survivors who should have been lost, the data that said human methods should not work but somehow did. She sent the manifest. The human operation expanded across Helix Station like nothing Ara had ever seen. They were not following any logical pattern. They were not prioritizing by survival probability or personnel value. They were simply going wherever people needed help. A human medic named spent 40 minutes extracting an administrator from a collapsed corridor. The probability of success was 3%. The administrator had a low priority rating, should have moved on to higher yield rescues. Instead, she tunneled through debris with her bare hands when her cutting tools failed, talking to the entire time. "Stay with me, Delegate's voice came over the open channel. "I know it hurts, I know you're scared, but I'm not leaving you, you hear me? I'm not leaving you." The survived, so did 3 others trapped in the same section. Human teams pushed deeper into the dying station. They found a school where 70 children had been sheltered by their teachers in a reinforced gym. Standard protocol had written that section off hours ago. The humans brought them out, every single child, every single teacher. They found a medical bay where staff had refused to abandon their patients. 43 civilians on life support, too fragile to move according to evacuation calculations. The humans rigged portable systems and carried them out on stretchers through corridors that were actively collapsing. Ara watched a rescue team led by a man named Williams enter a section that was 90% collapsed. The dimensional rifts were spreading. The entire area would be gone in minutes. Williams's team found 12 maintenance workers trapped in a service tunnel. "Command, we need 3 minutes," Williams called. "We can get them out." "Negative Team 7, Ara found herself saying. "That section is failing. Probability of structural collapse is 98%. Withdraw immediately." "Not without them," Williams said calmly. 3 minutes, command." Ara wanted to order them out. The mathematics were clear. They were going to die, all of them. She should invoke her authority, force them to withdraw, save the trained rescuers for people who actually had a chance. She thought about words, about communities and resilience, about people who went back and saved others. "You have 3 minutes," Ara said quietly. "Make them count." Williams and his team emerged with all 12 workers. They had 40 seconds to spare before that section of Helix ceased to exist. The rescue operation continued for 36 hours. Ara stopped trying to impose protocol. She simply coordinated, providing the humans with sensor data, structural analysis, and logistics support. She watched them work with a growing sense of wonder. They were not efficient. They took risks that no sane calculator would approve. They diverted resources to low-probability rescues. They exhausted themselves beyond any reasonable operational limit. And they saved people who should have died. The human teams lost 12 of their own in the rescue. Ara recorded each name. Who had saved Delegate was caught in a secondary collapse while extracting a group of civilians from a failing section. She got them out. She did not make it herself. Williams died sealing a breach that threatened to kill 40 people in a makeshift shelter. The breach was sealed. The 40 people survived. Each human death was noted, mourned, and then their teammates went back into the dying station to save more lives. The cascade finally stabilized after 36 hours. The quantum drive team managed to contain the reaction. Helix Station was crippled, barely holding together, but it stopped collapsing. Ara began compiling the final numbers, preparing herself for the grim accounting that always followed a disaster. Then she saw the survivor count, and her computation nodes struggled to process the data. 47,293. She ran the calculation again. It could not be right. Standard protocols predicted 10,000 survivors at best, but the numbers did not lie. The humans had pulled 31,000 people from sections the Council had declared lost. They had evacuated areas that should have been impossible to reach. They had saved children, maintenance workers, civilians, low-priority personnel who should have been written off by any logical assessment. They had rewritten what was possible. Ara stood in the command center, surrounded by screens showing the human rescue ships departing, their holds full of survivors. She thought about her 30 years of experience, all the disasters she had managed, all the careful calculations, all the lives saved by following proper protocol. And she wondered how many more could have been saved if they had done things the human way. His voice came over the channel one last time. "Commander Ara, we're departing Helix now. Medical transports are taking the wounded to proper facilities. Casualty collection is complete. No one left behind." "Commander," Ara said, and her voice was not quite steady, "your people saved 31,000 souls that our protocols declared lost. You lost 12 of your own doing it. I do not understand how this is sustainable." There was a long pause, then said, "It's sustainable because every person we saved will remember. They'll remember that when everything was falling apart, someone came for them. Not because they were important, not because they had a high survival probability, because they mattered. That matters more than you think." The human ships jumped to FTL and were gone. Ara stood in the command center for a long time, looking at the numbers that should not have been possible. 47,293. The mathematics said it should not have worked, but mathematics did not account for humans who simply refused to accept that some people could not be saved. The emergency session of the Galactic Disaster Recovery Council convened 48 hours after the Helix Station disaster. Every delegate was present. The chamber was silent as Ara presented her report. She showed the projections based on standard protocol. 10,000 survivors expected. The reality, 47,293. She showed the resource expenditure. She showed the human rescue techniques. She showed the casualty data, including the 12 humans who had died saving people who should have already been lost. Then she stepped back and waited. The silence stretched. Finally, Commander entered the chamber. She was not supposed to be here. Earth was not a member of the council, but no one objected as she walked to the center of the room. "You think we're inefficient," said without preamble. "You think we're emotional. You're right, we are, but here's what you're missing." She pulled up a holographic display. It showed a young girl, maybe 7 years old by their developmental standards. "This is Delegate's daughter. She was in the school section we evacuated. Standard protocol would have written her off. After all, what's one child when you could save 100 diplomats instead?" The image changed. A human man with cybernetic arms. "This is Jackson Moore. He was a maintenance worker on Helix, low priority rating. We pulled him from Section 14 while it was actively collapsing. Turns out Jackson knows the station's ventilation system better than any schematic. He guided our teams through passages you didn't even know existed. He helped us save 300 people." More faces filled the display. This woman developed the portable shield generators that protected civilians during extraction. This man coordinated the civilian shelters that kept people alive until we could reach them. This teenager held together a medical bay with duct tape and prayers until our teams arrived. Every single one of them was marked as low priority. Every single one of them helped save lives. Looked around the chamber. Your protocols optimize for immediate survivability based on predetermined value. You decide who deserves to live based on their job title, their skills, their importance to the galactic economy. But you can't predict who will matter. You can't calculate who will make the difference. The miner you abandon might be the engineer who solves your next crisis. The child you leave behind might grow up to save 100 others. The maintenance worker you write off might know the one thing that saves everyone. Delegate stood. Emotional rhetoric does not change mathematical reality. Your methods require excessive resource expenditure. You lost 12 trained rescue personnel at Helix. Those specialists could have saved lives in future disasters. They did save lives, said softly. Saved 43 people before she died. Williams saved hundreds. Every single person we lost died saving others. They knew the risks. They went anyway, because that's what rescue means. Not saving the people you can afford to save, saving the people who need saving. Unsustainable, another delegate argued. You cannot maintain such expenditure across galactic scale. Smiled slightly. Can't we? Let me show you something. The holographic display changed. It showed data from Earth's last 50 years of disaster response. Resource expenditure, trained personnel, survival rates, long-term outcomes. You're looking at this wrong. Yes, we spend more resources on individual rescues. Yes, we take greater risks. But look at the overall data. Our communities are more resilient. Our survival rates are higher across the board. Our rescue personnel are more experienced because they train in the hardest conditions. And our civilians trust us, which means they follow evacuation orders. They cooperate with rescue teams. They help each other survive until we arrive. She pulled up comparison data. Your protocols at Helix would have saved 10,000. Ours saved 47,000. Yes, we lost 12 rescuers, but by your own calculations, you would have lost 40,000 civilians, which is the more sustainable loss. Ara watched the council delegates processing this information. She could see the calculations running behind their eyes, their personal computation devices, their biological processors. The mathematics were undeniable. The human methods, for all their apparent inefficiency, produced better overall outcomes. But mathematics alone could not drive policy. The council needed more than numbers. They needed to understand why the human methods worked. If I may, Ara said, stepping forward. The chamber quieted. I have operated under council protocols for 30 years. I have calculated survivability indices for 1,000 disasters. I have prioritized by value, accepted necessary losses, and believed this was the only logical approach. She looked at. Then I watched commanders' teams at Helix. I watched them ignore every protocol. I watched them take risks that should have killed them, and I watched them save people I had already declared lost. Ara's computation nodes glowed brighter as she processed what she was about to say. The question before us is not whether human methods are efficient. Clearly, they are not by traditional measures. The question is whether efficiency is what matters most. Commander asked me a question after Helix. She said, if the mathematics say we should abandon you to save resources for others, is that the galaxy you want to live in? The chamber was silent. Ara continued, I have calculated the answer. No, that is not the galaxy we should build, because a galaxy where people are abandoned based on priority calculations is a galaxy where no one is truly safe, where everyone knows that in a crisis they might be the one written off, where trust in rescue operations erodes because survival depends on your job title rather than your humanity. She pulled up her own data analysis. Human methods create resilient communities because people know help will come. Not help if you're important enough. Not help if the mathematics favor you. Just help. This psychological factor changes behavior during disasters. Civilians shelter in place and cooperate because they trust rescue will arrive. They help each other survive because they've seen that survival is possible. This alone accounts for a measurable increase in disaster survival rates. Delegate spoke again. You propose we abandon logic for emotion. No, Ara said firmly. I propose we expand our logic. We have been optimizing for immediate resource efficiency. Humans optimize for community resilience and long-term survival. Their logic is more complex, includes more variables, and produces better outcomes. It is not less logical. It is more logical. Nodded slowly. We're not asking you to feel what we feel. We're asking you to see what we see. Every person matters, not because of sentiment, because it's true, because you can't predict who will be essential, because communities that believe in mutual rescue are stronger than communities based on calculated abandonment. This is a fundamental restructuring of galactic disaster response, another delegate said. Implementation would require complete protocol revision, training of all personnel, resource reallocation across sectors. It would take years. Yes, agreed. It would, but ask yourselves, how many people will die while we delay? How many survivors could we save if we started now? The debate continued for 3 days. Species from across the galaxy argued over mathematics, ethics, resource allocation, and the fundamental question of how to value life. Ara participated in every session, presenting her analysis, answering questions, and steadily pushing the council toward what she now saw as the inevitable conclusion. On the third day, Delegate rose to speak. The philosopher had been the most vocal opponent of the human proposal. Everyone expected him to make a final argument against adoption. Instead, he said, I have meditated on this question. I have consulted the ancient texts of my people, and I have concluded that Commander is correct. We have been optimizing for the wrong variables. The chamber stirred. Continued, the pursuit of logic is not about cold calculation. It is about finding the deepest truths. And the truth is this. A civilization is measured not by how efficiently it saves the valuable, but by how persistently it saves the vulnerable. The humans have shown us a more complete logic. We would be illogical to ignore it. The vote that followed was not unanimous. 17 delegates voted against the proposal, citing sustainability concerns and resource limitations. But 248 voted in favor. The persistence doctrine, as it came to be known, was adopted as the new galactic standard for disaster response. Implementation began immediately. Human instructors were assigned to training centers across the galaxy. The concept of calculated recklessness became part of every rescue specialist's education. Priority indices were abolished. Survival probability calculations were recontextualized not as permission to abandon, but as challenges to overcome. The first year was chaotic. Rescue teams struggled with protocols that demanded they save everyone, not just those with favorable odds. Resource allocation became more complex, requiring creativity rather than simple mathematical distribution. Some disasters had worse outcomes as teams adjusted to the new methods. But slowly, measurably, the numbers improved. Survival rates increased. Response times decreased. Communities reported higher trust in disaster response. Civilians were more likely to cooperate with evacuation orders and less likely to panic during emergencies. 2 years after Helix, Ara led a mixed-species team into a collapsing on Prime. The structure was failing, the evacuation window was closing, and 200 civilians were trapped in a section that had 12 minutes before complete collapse. Standard protocol, the old protocol, said extraction was impossible. The resource cost would be too high. The survival probability was too low. Ara looked at her team. Humans and a dozen other species, all of them trained in the new methods, all of them ready to do what seemed impossible. Nobody gets left behind, she said, and was surprised by how natural the words felt. We're going in. They entered the collapsing section with 8 minutes remaining. The structure groaned around them, metal tearing and supports failing. Ara's computation nodes screamed warnings, calculating collapse probabilities in real time. She ignored them. The civilians were huddled in what had been a shopping plaza. Families with children, elderly individuals who could not move quickly, workers who had stayed behind to help others, all of them looking at the rescue team with desperate hope. We're going to move fast, Ara announced. Follow our instructions exactly. We will get everyone out. Her team split into practice groups. Humans carried the elderly and injured. used their strength to clear debris, calculated optimal escape routes on the fly, coordinated the civilian movement with military precision. They had 4 minutes when the first group reached the extraction point, 3 minutes when the second group made it. The structure was coming apart. Ara could see the cascade failure spreading, could calculate exactly when the collapse would become irreversible. 90 seconds left, 43 civilians still inside. "Move," she ordered. Her team pushed harder, carrying people who could not run, clearing paths through falling debris. The humans were singing something, a work chant to keep rhythm. The sound was illogical, emotional, completely inappropriate. It helped, somehow it helped. 30 seconds, 15 people still trapped. Ara saw a human named carrying an elderly woman on his back. He was not going to make it. The math was clear. He was too far from the exit. The collapse would catch him. He knew it too. She could see it in his face, but he kept running. Ara called, "Drop her and save yourself." He did not even slow down. "Not how we do things, Commander." 10 seconds, 5 civilians, was 5 meters from the extraction point. The collapse began, metal screaming, structure folding. Gravity itself seemed to rebel against the failing supports. Dove through the extraction point with the woman still on his back. He tumbled, rolled, and came up running as the section behind him ceased to exist. They made it to the ships with no time to spare. Ara counted heads 3 times, unable to believe the numbers. 200 civilians extracted, 0 casualties. "Good work, team," she said, and meant it more than she had ever meant anything in her life. Was helping the elderly woman into the medical bay. She was crying, holding his hand, thanking him in her native language. He smiled tiredly and said something Ara did not catch. Then he saw the commander watching. "All of them," Commander said, "just like you promised." Ara nodded, "Just like I promised." Later, on the command ship heading back to base, Ara compiled her report on the Prime rescue. The mathematics still said it should not have been possible. Her computation nodes kept running the numbers, kept finding the logical impossibility of saving all 200 civilians. But they had done it, just as the humans had done at Titan and Harmony and Helix and 100 other disasters that should have been fatal. She thought about Commander's words from 2 years ago, about communities and resilience, about the understanding that every person mattered, about optimizing for something beyond immediate efficiency. Ara had been wrong about a great many things, but she had learned, and she had changed. Her report concluded with a simple statement. The persistence doctrine is not merely efficient, it is right. We do not save people because the mathematics favor them. We save them because they need saving. This is the foundation of a civilization worth building. She sent the report and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, other disasters were happening. Other teams were fighting to save lives. And thanks to what the humans had taught them, more people would survive. Not because the odds favored them, but because someone refused to leave them behind. That was the galaxy Ara wanted to live in. That was the galaxy they were building, one impossible rescue at a time.